viewers and welcome to the Art with World. I am your host ARSHAD. Today we are going to discuss English poetry written by Pakistani poets, and to discuss that we have with us Rashid Saleem Sahab. Rashid Saleem Sahab is teaching English language in a local Islamabad college. In addition to that, he is a poet and a critic as well. Welcome to our show, Rashid.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm fine.
As you know, English in Pakistan has gone through different phases. At the time of independence, people preferred to write in Urdu or vernacular languages, and gradually the trend of writing in English poetry increased, particularly in 60s and 70s. And I think people give credit to Taufiq Rafat Sahab, who blended modern sensibility with local traditions as well. So, could you give us an overview of poetry written by Pakistani poets in English language?
Yes, you are right. In the beginning, English was considered as the language of the colonizers. So, Allama Iqbal and many other poets who could write in English, but they chose to write either in Persian or Urdu.
But this was pre-partition.
Yeah, this was pre-partition.
Yeah.
And but we do have Ahmad Ali, who wrote
Twilight in Delhi.
Twilight in Delhi.
It was a novel.
Yeah, it was a novel, and it was written just before the partition.
I think 1940, I guess.
Yeah, but at that time, you know, there were few people who thought of it as just another language. But after the partition, in the beginning, this feeling actually continued. And lots of people prefer to write in other languages. But Taufiq Rafat, as you have rightly mentioned, he introduced what is called the Pakistani diction, or he actually used the word idiom. So, instead of just following the British canon, British or American canon, he used the words, he actually borrowed a lot of words from Punjabi or Urdu, like in one of his poems he talks about red-asked bulbul, and he talks about shisham, and he also talks about palki, and lots of other words. But it's not just the words that he used. Actually, idiom is a much broader term. It means that it reflects the local culture. So you are right, in the beginning, due to nationalism, people avoided it, but then suddenly you find quite a lot of people who started this activity, and nowadays I think it should be considered as one of the Pakistani languages. So, as Pakistani Literature journal published by Academy of Letters, it includes poetry written in Sindhi, Urdu and other local languages of the world. Similarly, it also has included English poetry written by Pakistanis. So, Taufiq Rafat, he not only introduced this idiom, but he also, you can say, paved the way for the other authors. He is considered, sometimes he is called the Ezra Pound of Pakistan, because just like Ezra Pound, he had influenced a lot of later poets. And in Lahore, actually, he founded a small a gathering, and in that there were people like Athar Tahir, Kaleem Umar, Khalid Ahmed, Alamgir Hashmi and Waqas Khaja. All of them, they actually gave lectures and they criticized each other's work, and in a way they promoted this English poetry in Pakistan.
It was, I think, in 70s decade when there was a lot of activity, intellectual activity was going on.
Exactly.
When they found this group.
Yeah, when this group was found, at that time Taufiq Rafat's proper book was not yet published. I think it got published in 1985 1995 or something, but his work had already been published in some great anthologies. Actually, Oxford University Press had certain anthologies, published anthologies, if I can recall them right. It was like First Voices in 1965,
Okay.
and then in 1970 there was Pieces of 8, and then there was Wordfall, probably in 1974. And in this anthology, poetry by some great Pakistani poets got published, including Taufiq Rafat and Kaleem Umar, and I can't recall the name of all of them, but there were probably 6 poets who got published in the very first one, and then there were 8 that got published in the second anthology. So that was a good beginning, and Dr. Tariq Rahman, in his book History of Pakistani Literature from 1947 to 1988, he talks about these.
Okay. So was it a conscious effort of Taufiq Rafat to blend modern sensibility and local idiom, or
Yes, he actually wrote articles about it, he gave lectures on it, and his colleague Alamgir Hashmi in a radio program, literary magazine, they would often air poetry written by young poets, and although not all of them had the same point of view, but Taufiq Rafat, by doing so, actually became the only poet who became sort of popular in Pakistan, because his works were included in various anthologies and university courses, and they were understood. He consciously did it because people who could speak and understand English language, they already had rich cultural background. So he actually utilized that rich cultural background in order to produce depth and originality in his poetry.
I think it was quite common in early years of Pakistan that intellectuals have had international, they were aware of international discourse as well, and they were very much rooted in their local culture as well. They knew what's happening around, they knew other vernacular languages as well. And was it only experimentation in idiom, or there was some kind of new inclusion of local issues as
In
well?
Taufiq Rafat's poetry, you find plenty of experiences from his personal life, as well as what he witnessed and observed things happening around him. Taufiq Rafat was born and bred in Sialkot, so very often in his poetry you find Punjabi culture. Like in his very famous poem Kitchen, he talks about kitchen that have high roofs, and then the warmth of mother, and the
everyone eating in the same kitchen.
in the same kitchen, and then he tries to compare it with the modern kitchens and finds it boring and uninteresting.
Well, it's kind of nostalgia, because most of the people have shifted to new kind of kitchen now.
Yep. So he was not against progress actually, but he brought in the locale, so you find local characters and local concerns. Very often Taufiq Rafat's poetry is compared with W.H. Auden and T.S. Eliot and other modernist poets. But I personally think that although he didn't explicitly state it, but I find that there is plenty of Robert Frost in him as well. So he uses that local diction and local experiences, and out of those local experiences he gets something universal, and which touches to the psychology of man, rather than talking about people of a particular region.
He has used local metaphors, but his message is universal.
Yeah. For example, in one of his poems, which is entitled Wedding in the Flood. Now, I don't think it happens, it's not very frequent phenomena in rest of the world, but here ironically he talks about lots of local customs and kind of geographic and social barriers that people have to face. And similarly, in one of his poems, Gangrene, he talks about a young 12 years old boy who falls from the roof of a house, and later on he develops gangrene because of the neglect of his parents. And they come to him because he is living in a city. Somehow he couldn't convince them that it was important to amputate his foot, because it was already, they had already delayed it too much. So it's not just fascination and nostalgic viewing of culture. Instead, behind this culture there is some sort of social suppression for women, for kids, and this economic divide that I think you find behind his poetry, and that's what make his poetry deeper and richer and more meaningful for the people of this part of the world. But at the same time, he is internationally famous, and people quote him quite often, which is strange because his local concerns, out of these local concerns, he actually gets something which is universal and for everybody. In one of his poems, Reflections, actually he got ill, and for 3 years he was bedridden, and during these 3 years he wrote a long poem called Reflections, which is about life and death and rebirth, and about art and plenty of other things. And this is something that I think a great masterpiece. I personally like this very much, and I would like to read just one stanza out of it so that people can just have a better idea of what I mean. He says, words die earlier than the emotion they were meant to convey.
Oh, please say it again.
Words die earlier than the emotion they were meant to convey. For words are flesh and blood, are real. Emotion only a state of mind. The tone of green an artist sees in the turning light. What is so true as an artist's vision, or so untrue as an artist's vision? And yet he has no choice, for these repetitive illusions keep their summer always. He lives or dies by them. When a primitive who grunts and gestures is persuaded to wear clothes to hide his nakedness, he loses identity at once. A caricature who will endure as we conceived him to be. As we grow older, we try to pair words to the bone, for autumn has struck blindly at the equal leafiness of skull and vision.
Oh.
So here he uses so many different images and talks about the complex relationship between words and the thoughts that convey, and also how we are bound to the words, and we can't escape this reality. This is just one stanza out of many stanzas. This is a long poem. So you would see that these concerns are not local. These are representative artists anywhere in the world.
Can you talk about some other poets as well of those times?
Yeah, before moving on to other poets, I would like to mention that Taufiq Rafat, as you said that they were aware of vernaculars and local poetry, Taufiq Rafat has also translated Bulleh Shah's poetry into English, and also Puran Bhagat, which is a tale by Kader Yar, written in Punjabi. Many people had forgotten it, but he nonetheless translated it into English. And Puran Bhagat was actually a Raja from Sialkot, so he himself was from Sialkot. This might also be the reason why he did it.
Is there something that poets from Sialkot have been dominating literary scene in Pakistan?
Yeah,
including English poets.
Another great English poet from Sialkot is Zulfikar Ghaus.
Yeah, but I think he had left Pakistan. He is American.
Very early he had left Pakistan, but he was born and bred in Islam, in Sialkot.
He left this, I think, at the time of partition they got they immigrated to UK and then perhaps to USA.
To the USA, and then he went to the South America, like Brazil, and he wrote novels about there. But one thing that you find missing in his poetry is, or rather I should say, the sense of alienation, strong alienation, because he always yearned and longed for his original homeland. And that's one reason why Tariq Rahman included him among the Pakistani poets, and that's also why many universities in Pakistan include him among Pakistani English poets, although you are right, he should actually be considered as among the diaspora.
Yeah. He himself writes as Pakistani American poet?
He mostly said that he is like an alien.
Okay.
He considered himself as an alien because maybe he didn't fit in any of the cultures that he lived later on. So it's because of his longing and something that he missed in his life, which was really which makes him Pakistani in my views.
I think he's famous for his novels, but I think he's a good.
He actually started by writing poems. Okay. So he had already written 3 books of poetry before he turned to novels and short fiction.
And who are the other poets?
Well, another great name is Daud Kamal. Daud Kamal was originally from Peshawar. He was born in Abbottabad and studied at Burnhall College and then Burnhall College, Srinagar. And he actually belonged to elite learned family, and his father, if I am not wrong, Chaudhry Muhammad Ali, he was the Vice Chancellor of University of Peshawar. So Daud Kamal actually studied from Cambridge University, and then he came back and he taught at University of Peshawar for almost 20 years. He was head of the department there. And but his concerns are very different from Taufiq Rafat. So if Taufiq Rafat talks about common people and people from social classes of lower strata, Daud Kamal on the other hand had high consciousness of high art, and he rubbed shoulders with the elite. So his themes and concerns are quite different, but nonetheless he has quite a mastery over English language, and his poetry is actually has lasting impact on his readers.
So what's his significant contribution to English poetry as an art in Pakistan?
Well, like Taufiq Rafat, he was influenced by W.B. Yeats and T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden to some extent, and also T.E. Hulme. So he was like a kind of imagist poet from Pakistan, and in his poetry, like prayer beads one of his famous poems, and Winter Rain and Kingfisher, you find this imagism where he uses a striking image which is very precise and has very powerful impact. So his poems are quite brief, but nonetheless they are quite powerful. This is called Kingfisher. April is the kingfisher's beak, which pierces the river's glad torment. Is this an image of our love? Carnage in the rose valleys under the first light of our wounds.
Oh.
Right. So this image actually has multiple layers of meanings in it. If you just look at the word April and Kingfisher, you are immediately, if you are a student of English literature, you are immediately reminded of T.S. Eliot and his. Daud Kamal also did certain translations. He translated Faiz Ahmad Faiz's work.
Really?
And he also translated Ghalib's work, and it was published.
The whole?
No, it was just the selections,
Okay.
selected works of Ghalib and Faiz Ahmad Faiz.
Okay.
He wrote books like Remote Beginnings, Compass of Love and other poems, Recognition, and Before the Carnation Wither. So you have plenty of books, and he died in 1987. If he had lived a bit longer, he might have written as much as Taufiq Rafat, I believe. And there are many contemporary poets, I think, who are influenced by his poetry. One name that I can think of is Omar Tareen. And I think he followed the similar trajectory, and Omar Tareen also wrote 5-6 books, and he was also born in Abbottabad, and he also studied at Burnhall.
Yeah.
And he also shared his intellectual trajectory.
Yeah. And there is other very important poet, Ijaz Rahim Saab. He also came in our show, and he was also telling that he was highly impressed by Daud Kamal, and he kind of learned a lot from him as well. He was also from Abbottabad.
Okay, Ijaz Rahim.
Yeah, he has been awarded Academy of Letter Prize for Best English Poetry, I think twice. He's a very important poet as well.
Pakistani English literature, most of the things that we teach are like the poets which are included in the syllabus.
You were also talking of Alamgir Hashmi, sir.
Yeah, Alamgir Hashmi, he is one of the founders of poetry in Pakistan, because he also participated in that literary movement in Lahore, where he encouraged young poets to write in English. His poetry is as if you are talking to someone. It's like in a conversational tone, and very easy to understand. You won't find any complex, although there are deeper metaphors, but no complex vocabulary. It's not, he doesn't show off his learning actually. In Daud Kamal and Taufiq Rafat, you find lots of allusions and historical references, whereas in Alamgir Hashmi, it's something that is very touching and in a very conversational tone. Like in his book, I was talking about his very conversational tone and ordinary. It's not ordinary. I mean, as far as the metaphors are concerned, they are quite rich and deep. They are original, but he probably consciously tried to avoid that complex intertextuality which was prominent at that time. So, like Taufiq Rafat, I think his poetry is also quite popular even among the masses, just because of this. You don't have to be a scholar or a literary critic to.
So, Rashid Saab, we have discussed main poets of Pakistan who actually started in giving trends of English poetry in Pakistan. How about women poets who have written in English language in Pakistan and in diaspora?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because in the beginning there were not many women poets, although there was Maki Qureshi. She wrote quite early, and she is aunt of Hanif Qureshi, I believe, and so she was the first woman Pakistani writers in English, poets in English. But after the 21st century, in this 2000, after 2000, we have a plethora of women poetesses, and they are continuously writing. And I would just like to name a few, like one of the greatest is Imtiaz Dharkar, who received Queen's Award, which is in poetry, which is one of the greatest awards in Commonwealth. And
but she was actually, I think, born in Pakistan, but she had migrated to UK when she was not even
but
years
she is
old.
still a Pakistani.
Okay, fine.
By origin, at least.
Yeah.
And then you have this Shadab Zeest Hashmi, and she wrote. She actually experimented quite a lot with English poetry and introduced some new forms, some new genres. Like she wrote ghazals in English and qasida.
Really?
Yeah.
And how was reception of this kind of poetry? I mean, it was a new trend and new addition to English.
Well, ghazal was actually not introduced by her. It was already known in America because of Agha Shahid Ali. Agha Shahid Ali had written plenty of ghazals in English, but his ghazals were like sort of a bit modern type of ghazals, whereas Shadab, she tried to use the old classical form of ghazal that we find in Persian and in Urdu.
And I think Agha Shahid had a translation Faiz Ahmed Faiz as well. He's Kashmiri
he is
American.
a Kashmiri American poet. So, but still, you find not just translated. I would say that he borrowed quite a lot of ideas in his ghazals from Ghalib and Faiz. And we have Hima Raza. Hima Raza also experimented with English poetry. For example, I don't know what kind of this poetry will be called. It's bilingual poetry, where one stanza is in English and another stanza is in Urdu. She couldn't. She died young because of a car accident. Otherwise, I think she could have been one of the greatest women poets writing in Urdu, in English.
I think this is kind of following Mir Khusro's tradition. One line in Urdu and one in Persian.
Yeah, right. It has been a tradition in South Asia. Actually, Mir Khusro is a big name. Then you have Ilona Yusuf, and also recently you have Shabnam Riaz, and even Asma Mansoor, Asma Mansoor.
And what kind of topics they have chosen for, like themes they have chosen for their poetry, and style they have opted?
Most of them actually chose to talk about the marginalized and minorities in Pakistan, and some of them actually talked about different races, and also the Imtiaz Dharkar, for example, she wrote about women empowerment, and also how our society is suppressive in certain terms. In one of her poems, Parda, she talks about this veil and how it could be oppressive for women and their. But you have nostalgia, you have memory, you have history, you have other concerns as well. I mean, you can't just limit them to just women rights. In fact, you have all sorts of things, especially this Shadab Zeest Hashmi. She tried to introduce this Muslim identity and this Eastern kind of identity that we find very often we find in Urdu and Persian poetry.
Just I was wondering if you had to compare poets writing in English and poets writing in Urdu or other vernacular languages in Pakistan. I mean, what kind of differences you could highlight, and what are commonalities or similarities? And it's odd to ask like this, but how would you rate their poetic merit in terms of grasping different themes and communicating those themes and translating those ideas into poetry? And
well, it's very difficult for me to rate their work, but we have some great poets in Urdu as well as great poets in English. And I think it's just that we don't have big market for English poetry in Pakistan, and usually it's difficult to get your works published. Otherwise, we do find plenty of good poets in English, and they have quite a good mastery over English as well, and they can be compared with international poets from anywhere. In the beginning, you know, most of English poets, they tried to follow the British or American canon, but now with the advent of internet, they are exposed to poetry from all regions of the world, and therefore you find new trends and new concerns and new styles and experimentations, like this urban consciousness and kind of problems that we face while living in a city. And so I don't think it's fair to compare them with the Urdu poets. Urdu poets have a long tradition to follow, and some poets actually write in both languages, and they think that for few things it's better to write in Urdu, and for other subjects it's better to write in English. And I do agree with them, because
could you explain it further?
Some subjects taboo in Urdu, so it's difficult to talk. There is one poem, The Medal, by Taufiq Rafat, and there he talks about the feelings of a widow who receives a medal because her husband is martyred, and but she feels disgusted because she has become a widow, and people are sort of celebrating because he's got martyred, but so this is okay from here, but the kind of words that he uses there are, I think, only allowed in English. They can't be expressed in Urdu the way he did.
And how is the reception of English poetry in Pakistan? How many people read those poetry, and kind of intellectual discourse in that language? Are some groups formed to discuss issues of and themes of poetry in English in Pakistan?
I don't think there is a huge market for English poetry in Pakistan, and although most of these poets, they are writing wonderful poetry, but we don't have critics really appreciating their work, and publishers don't encourage them either. But recently I think it's gotten a little better, because you can get your poems published online, because there are some journals that are specifically for English poets in this region. For example, there is this The Missing Slate, which is an online journal, and similarly you have this Desi Writers Lounge, DWL, Desi Writers Lounge. They also have an online journal which is not restricted to Pakistani writers, rather you should say like South Asian writers writing in English, not just the poets, even short story writers, fiction writers can also contribute. And this DWL is also publishing bilingual journal by the name of Paper Cuts. So, some selected works, they are actually printed from that online journal, and so there are some platforms, but I think mostly English poetry in Pakistan is alive because of because it's included in our BS English literature programs, and very often we try to understand English poets with a particular framework, like post-colonial writers or like postmodern writers, or which sometimes
can you explain it further?
Because it's the requirement in a university. Often they are included as post-colonial writers or as postmodern poets or modernist poets or imagist poets. So we make intellectual and learned discussions, and there are plenty of you can say research articles available, because that's a requirement. So in the academic circles you do have these poetry circles, but you can't compare them with Urdu. Urdu poets have a larger audience, and even today you have these mushairas which are still popular. So you can't compare them with Urdu poets.
Did it make any change that we have a chain of English medium schools, and people who study there, they generally have more interest in English language than Urdu language. So did it have any effect on increasing readership of English poetry in the country?
Yeah, it did. Actually, in 1960s and 70s, as you mentioned, poetry in English was quite popular. But then in 80s, in Ziaul Haq's regime, when Urdu was given emphasis, you hardly find any poet writing in English. But then in LUMS, when these courses were introduced, once again we have English language thriving. And since many of our private schools, they offer education in English, so very often in their anthologies you find the works of English writers, especially poets from Pakistan. So Taufiq Rafat, for example, Zulfikar Ghaus and Daud Kamal, they frequently appear in anthologies, and even at higher secondary schools and even O level, A levels, and even in university you find their original works. So this has kept it alive, and in elite circles there are some conventions where poetry is still recited, but it's not as much celebrated as I think the fiction writers, and that is probably one reason why you find so many fiction writers writing in English than the poets.
Yeah, I think it one thing is what I understood from your discussion is that English poetry has not become part of our mainstream culture by any standard up till now.
For a minor, I think like 1% of our population is like they are genuinely interested in it, and some of them don't speak English as a foreign language like we do. For them, it's not even a second language. It's like people who are born abroad, or they have studied abroad, had plenty of time with the in Great Britain or in America or other parts of the world. So for some of them it's even difficult to understand Urdu poetry. So I think now we should consider that like other languages of Pakistan, English is also one of the languages that are spoken in Pakistan. So you can number it at maybe 15th, 16th language of Pakistan.
We just referred to Pakistani writers who are writing in English, particularly the fiction. I think they have taken up the themes which are very controversial, you can say in some ways, but they are very much rooted in Pakistani society or in Pakistani diaspora, and they also deal with different issues, socio-political, regional as well. So they have a wide range of themes to discuss about and to write about in those novels, whereas English poets are rather confined to linguistic expressions, mostly, not all, and some limited themes, I guess.
Yeah, you are right. Fiction writers mainly keep in mind their audience, whereas poets mostly they are just concerned about what they feel and how to express it better. Although there are socio-political issues, because you can't be isolated from these things, but they also have purely intellectual concerns, like reflections, as I was saying. I mean, you don't find politics, instead you find philosophy and art, and in Daud Kamal you also have concerns about, which are purely intellectual concerns, not problems of the common people. So you are right. Maybe this is one reason why they haven't been as popular as the fiction writers, because their works are not propagated, whereas the novelists, when they write like Reluctant Fundamentalist or Case of Exploding Mangoes, and of course a lot of people think that these are the things that they are concerned with.
It may be correct to some extent that poets just write about themselves, but they write about society around as well. I have yet to find any great Urdu poet or even Punjabi poet in Pakistan who has not written about things around him. But anyway, I agree what you are saying. So what are the new trends?
No, I also agree with you. I was probably I couldn't make myself clear. I am not saying that they are not concerned about political and economic and socio political issues. Of course they are, but they have a subjective point of view, and sometimes their concern is purely intrinsic. So you can't find an objective reality behind it. And even if there are objective events, as in Taufiq Rafat's poetry, usually they end with universalizing or generalizing the feeling behind it, rather than just describing a particular event.
So what do you see future of English poetry in Pakistan? When there are some new avenues as well, some publishing points as well. There is a lot of English medium schools in Pakistan. How do you think?
I think these online journals that I was talking about earlier on, they have really given a good hope for English poetry in Pakistan, and that's a platform, because in Pakistan it's very difficult to get published, and especially if you tell them that your poetry is in English, of course you don't have great audience here. So either you have to pay for your own book as many Urdu poets do, or because there is no demand and publishers are not willing to publish it. But these online journals and universities and some English medium schools, and even they I think are a beacon of light and hope that English poetry would be, we will continue to write in English English. And recently there are so many contemporary poets, young girls whose work has not been published, but in many poetry competitions their work appears, and it seems that we have plenty of talent in English poetry, and it will continue, I am hopeful.
Thank you very much, Rashid sir, for being with us this evening, sharing all these ideas and with us and with our viewers.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So viewers, thank you very much for watching us. See you next Sunday, same time.